Welcome, guys, to another edition of Ranking. We took a month off here so Tom can move. As you can see, he's got a new background information there. Tom's music room.
Yes, yes, indeed. I have. I lived in the same house for 23 years, and in Albion, New York, and I moved to a much bigger city, Oakfield, New York. So yeah, I, I think I may actually move to the only town smaller than Albion, but got myself a nice little music room here, and we're starting to put up some of the memorabilia and stuff on the walls. And as we were discussing off camera, attempting to alphabetize my record collection of 2,000 records has been it's been a daunting task. And so I this gets me away from it for a while, but as soon as we're done, that's exactly what I'm going to go back to doing tonight. So hopefully we can make some more progress, but oh well.
All right. Well, today we got an interesting band that oddly enough hasn't made an album since 2009. Only one album in the last 30 years it seems like.
Yeah.
Anyhow, we're talking about Foreigner. We're talking Foreigner today. We're going to rank all the studio albums, beginning with the first one in 1977, all the way up until the last one, 2009's Can't Slow Down.
So how about a little foreigner trivia, Joey? I'm going to test your knowledge.
Uh,
Where did the band come up with the name Foreigner?
because of the nationalities of the members of the band.
That is correct. Yes, they were Americans and Brits, meaning that no matter where they performed, somebody would be a foreigner. So that is for those of you out there that didn't know the origin of the name, unlike Joey, who clearly did. That's where it came from. And who was the keyboardist in the original lineup? Do you remember what band he was in before he joined Foreigner?
Oh boy, was it King Crimson?
It was King Crimson. Yes, very good. I can't trick you, can I?
Oh, you can get me, sir.
What was the name of the band that Lou Grammatico was in before he joined Foreigner? I know you know this one.
Yeah, Black Sheep.
And what about the one before that? It
That I don't know.
was called Poor Heart. Yeah, that was the name of it. So
Well, some trivia here, and we got some, with Lou's close ties to Rochester. Hopefully that
yeah.
this will definitely hit home here with this one. I mean, Foreigner, they've been around since late 70s, and they've played so many big shows out in Western New York and Rochester and the surrounding area. You remember the day when Foreigner was headlining the stadium out here in Buffalo?
Yeah, I mean they Foreigner had a great run of songs, and which is good and bad. I mean, the bad part of that is that they really got to a point in their career where they just didn't need to record anymore because they had so many songs that they could just perform that catalog of songs off of, I don't know, I think they maybe draw from 5 or 6 of their albums on their most recent tours. But man, they just cranked it out, hit after hit after hit, and then that's it. I mean, you just didn't need to do it anymore, which is kind of a shame.
All right, well, let's dig right in. Grab your nice beverage, sit back and relax as we break down our favorite Foreigner albums.
Yes, my favorite beverage. I love this stuff. Now, for people outside of the Rochester, Buffalo area, this is Wegmans brand lime mint soda, and it's really good. So, like, if you like La Croix or bubbly or that kind of stuff, it's excellent. What does that have to do with Foreigner? Not a thing.
All right. Well, you begin with your selection of your Foreigner album. That would be, I guess, number 9 here, since we got 9 albums here overall.
Well, I mean, the title of the album is not No Surprises, but the fact that it's number 9 is probably not a surprise. I think we're both going to be on the same page with this one. It is Unusual Heat. And this is an album that Foreigner recorded after Lou Gramm's departure, his first departure. And the lead vocalist was a guy named Johnny Edwards. Now, let me say this about this album, because I just revisited it recently because we were going to be doing this ranking and was trying to remember, kind of what it sounded like. The problem was that Johnny Edwards' vocals. I think in some ways Johnny Edwards' vocals are closer to Lou Gramm's than Kelly Hansen's, at least at times. I mean, you could hear a certain tenor in Johnny Edwards' voice that's very reminiscent of kind of classic early Foreigner. The problem with Unusual Heat is that the songs are just not memorable. They're all just kind of, they're kind of boring, to be honest with you. I mean, for lack of a better term. And it's one of those albums I think you listen to and you go, that's okay. But it's especially when you have the name like Foreigner, I think that there is an expectation that it'll be a little bit better quality. So, what's your number 9, Joey?
Well, I'm going back to the same album, obviously. Yeah, I mean, that's the one thing I've noticed too about this album, Unusual Heat. It's just a lot of filler on there, songs that maybe they were great demos, maybe, but they just never, they didn't have Lou, to help with the writing. I think, it looks like it was written, most of the tracks were written by Mick, Johnny Edwards, as you mentioned, and Terry Thomas, who actually produced the album and went on to produce. Bad Company when after Paul Rogers had left, he did the '80s Bad Company albums, a lot of them, and he also did a Tesla album somewhere in the middle there. But for some reason, these songs, other than the one that got a little radio airplay, "Low Down and Dirty," that was about the only song most people ever heard from it.
Yeah, again, it's not a horrible album. It's kind of reminds me of like Gary Sharon took over in Van Halen. They just didn't have the songs. For whatever reason, the songs just weren't that good. That's all.
Got a barker here.
I get it. It's usually my dogs that are barking. I think your dogs are just saying, "Hey man, this album is a real dog." But anyhow,
Well, maybe he
that's
likes that album, and he was just giving us his opinion of it.
or it could be. And Joey, think about it. No matter what, Unusual Heat is still in the top 10 of Foreigner albums. Every list that you make.
Yeah, at least until two more albums are made.
Yeah, unless they make a couple more. Johnny Edwards is like, no, don't make any more.
All right, well, let's go on to number 8. This will get good here.
Oh Lord, I struggled with this one. I'm almost thinking about making a last minute change. Um, I'm going to. I originally had.
Oh,
I'm gonna put Agent Provocateur onto this one, and I'll tell you why. Because even
oh,
though even though I Want to Know What Love is a classic Foreigner song, this album sounds so dated. It's loaded with just these 80s keyboard heavy, just it's just the album I think has not held up well over the years, with the possible exception of I Want to Know What Love Is. What the heck else is on here? I'm trying to even remember. I mean, everything to me is, and there's like there's some
well,
ballads
that
on
was
side,
yesterday, correct? A top 40.
which again, it's a keyboard driven song. I mean, it's okay, but it's that sound just permeates the whole album. Every song has that kind of annoying keyboard sound. And I think this is the album that kind of ruined Foreigner. It was just, I don't know. I can't.
Ouch.
I almost find it unlistenable. I'm not gonna lie. Now to Foreigner
Ouch.
faithful, if you remembered what town I live in, please forget it and don't come to my door. Okay, because this is, I mean, I Want to Know What Love is in terms of a singular song. You can't say anything bad about it. It's beautiful. It's moving. It is otherworldly. It's a concert staple. The rest of the album, I think, is just super mediocre. It just that was yesterday's a little catchy, but it's catchy in an MTV '80s way. It's not catchy in a Foreigner heavy riff way, if you know what I'm saying. So there
All
you go.
right. All right. Wow.
I'm hoping it's not your number one, because then we're really gonna deviate.
Well, we're definitely going to go back to this one, but it's not number 8 for me.
All
And
right.
but number 8 for me will probably surprise you a little bit because you're probably thinking, it's probably the one another
Yeah.
one without Lou, but it's not actually. My number 8 is going to go to Mr. Moonlight, and the
Mm-hmm.
reason why, well, Mr. Moonlight is, it came out at the time when obviously the music scene was changing. It was that for me. I couldn't believe it when it came out because I didn't know anything about it. I go to record theater one day and there it is in the bin, Mr. Moonlight. I said, "Wow, I got to get this." Sure enough, I did, and it's got its good tracks on there. Don't get me wrong; it's a decent album, but Foreigner you expect a lot more out of, and I feel there's a lot of half the album's good, half the album's give or take it or leave it. You know what I'm saying? But you know, until the end of time, just missed out on the top 40, cracking in at number 42. White Lie, that's the song that leads off the album. That's a great song. Rain, the album seems like it starts off good, but as it gets going, I kind of lose my interest in it a little bit there. All right,
All
so
right.
that
Well, we'll definitely have a deviation on that one, but we'll get to that later.
okay. Wow, I might be driving down there later today. We'll be having a little sparring match here. No.
Yeah.
All right, let's go on to our number 7.
Well, this would be the Kelly Hansen "Can't Slow Down," and I like this album because I feel like it captures some really good classic Foreigner elements.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good album. It's not a great album. Um, I think they were performing. I can't remember. They were doing at least one track from it for a little while, and then they kind of abandoned it. Do you remember which track they were performing live?
I know they played When It Comes to Love a little bit, and I
That's the
think
one. Yeah, yeah. Which is not a bad song. Um, the title track's good. I mean, you know what? I remember when this thing came out and I bought it. It was packaged. They were doing this thing for a while. I think Journey did the same thing,
mm-hmm.
where they packaged it with remakes of the old catalog. So you got
Right.
one disc of "Can't Slow Down," and then the other CD was just the Kelly Hansen singing the Lou Gramm material. And yeah, I mean, it's good. I enjoyed it. I remember listening to it in my car when cars used to have CD players. At least I know some still do, but they're not standard anymore.
Right.
And I remember enjoying it. But again, it's not necessarily an album that I go back to a lot. It's okay. It's good. It's serviceable. I think they certainly could have done more than one or two songs for a longer period of time. I'm kind of surprised that they just sort of abandoned it and went to just classic catalog stuff for the last 10, 15 years.
Yeah, I agree because there's a couple good songs in there that they could have definitely, help push, in their concerts to hopefully
Yeah.
get the album going here for sure. In Pieces is one of them.
Yep.
There's a few of them that, this album, like you said, it isn't bad. From this point on, they're only going to get better. So, and it gets tougher ranking these. Let me tell you, that's one thing I can tell you.
Yeah,
All
and
right.
Kelly Hansen's a great vocalist. Let's call it what it is. I mean, he really is. He's a dynamic performer. He's a great front man. I think I'm honestly I'm surprised they never did another album after this because I'm sure that he's got it in him. Maybe it's just Nick that doesn't see the value in it, but it's kind of a shame.
Yeah, I would have loved to seen another album from them for sure.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm in the same page with you on this one. That's why continuing on talking about this album real quick for just a minute. You basically touched everything that I would actually say on there. Um, it was interesting because Marty Fredrickson actually wrote all the songs along with Mick and Kelly. Um, Very interesting. For the most part, there was a few outside writers that else, and of course they included the "Fool for You Anyway," the old Foreigner song that Mick Jones brought back. They redid it for this album. But like you said, for Kelly Hansen's first Foreigner album, I think it's a commendable album. You know,
Hmm.
and like you said, had we seen, it would have been nice to seen another album with Kelly singing for sure.
Yeah, no doubt.
All right.
We
Well,
are finally up to now. If
um,
you knew what album I was going to pick, you would have had
the
inside
inside information.
information. Boo. Inside information. This is the one with, let's see, Say You Will, Say You Won't. I think inside information is sort of the setup piece for Agent Provocateur. It's when they started to have that shift towards the more commercial keyboard heavy sound. And if you get a chance to read Lou Gramm's book, he kind of talks about this too. I think the level of frustration that he had with the band's direction at that point.
Oh yeah.
And Mick Jones' strength. I mean, I had the chance to interview Mick. I don't know if you have. He's a phenomenal interview, and he's really into Buddy Holly. And I was thinking at the time, geez, what's Buddy Holly and Foreigner have in common? But it's as we talked more, it's that those riffs, those guitar riffs.
Mm.
So I think the fact that this album kind of moved away from that, went into the more keyboard thing. It's where it kind of lost the magic that really made Foreigner. I don't know, man. I just some is I could probably almost make a case to put it down a notch and put Can't Slow Down, but Can't Slow Down just didn't quite cut it. I think Lou is still singing really well at this stage of Foreigner's career. They still have some nuggets, but to me, an indication of just how good a Foreigner record is how many of the songs from this record is the band playing in concert today? Because the only thing they're playing right
Mm.
now are the hits. You
Actually,
know?
only say what you say you will. Pretty much is it off this one.
Yeah, and I don't even know if they do that on a regular basis. I mean, to me, that's a song that probably gets dropped from the set list more than a lot of the other ones.
Yeah.
But there's some good stuff on here. Again, it's definitely kind of the beginning of the end of the great era, but can't go on forever.
Exactly. And my number, what are we on? Number 6. Yeah.
Yep.
Mine is the same. Believe it or not, this album actually reached platinum status. I don't know how myself. I mean, this is one of those Foreigner albums that I never bought till like 20 years later for some odd reason. I guess it just didn't do much for me. As far as all the previous albums before it. Like you said, this is where it seems like everything. And this album was actually recorded between Lou's 2 solo albums too. So he had his Ready or Not album already released that came out, and then Inside Information came out, and then Lou came out with his other solo album. So it's like if you listen to Lou's 2 solo albums and then stick this in the middle of it, yeah, you could definitely see it's a whole different game with all these keyboards and stuff like you mentioned.
Yep.
But it does have some decent songs. I mean, obviously, Heart Turns to Stone when it kicks off the album is pretty cool. But the one that, for me, I'd say, other than Say You Will, Can't Wait. That song is phenomenal. That's one song that kind of
Hmm.
grabbed me, and I think that might actually be my favorite song on the whole album. Can't Wait. One of those songs, classic Lou voice, and it's one of the heavier songs on the album, compared to I Don't Want to Live Without You, which is kind of like the third version
Yeah.
of Waiting for a Girl Like You, basically. Everybody lumps that one in with I Want to Know What Love Is and Waiting for a Girl Like You, and I guess they had to complete the trifecta there or something.
Yeah, it's very formulaic, and I think around the same time Mick Jones had his solo record come out. So I think this is where where bands material start to suffer. The Who kind of went through this as well when Pete Townsend was starting to do his solo albums, and the argument was that Pete was saving his good stuff for his solo records, stuff that might have been better suited for the Who, but he was worried more about his solo career at the time. And I think both Mick and Lou were probably thinking, when they'd write a song or whatever, they weren't necessarily going to give the good stuff to Foreigner because they would rather have the good stuff be on their solo album so that their solo careers could advance, even if they were returning to Foreigner at some point down the road. And Foreigner was at a stage of their career where you know their album's going to go platinum. They just have to remake the album and not deviate too much from the formula, and it's going to sell. And that's exactly what happened with this one.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think it just sold basically. It's one of those albums where, you just got done selling so many albums, and it
Yeah.
probably shipped platinum even for that matter.
Right. Yeah. I agree 100%. Yep. And that's still the MTV era, if I remember correctly. So they're still getting a lot of MTV airplay as well. So they had the advantage of the airplay and the reputation, and they were still riding that wave.
All right, so let's put that one to bed, and we're going to go on to our top 5 Foreigner. Here we go. This is where we get down to the nitty gritty.
My next one I got is Head Games. It's you and me, baby. I got head games. I got no hair on my head, so that's why I got head games. But I don't know. I like this album. This is the one that has, yeah, Dirty White Boy. Now, this is actually the first Foreigner album I bought because I
Hmm.
was a freshman in high school when it came out. And a little bit of a backstory. This song on there called Rev on the Red Line. And Lou sings about running all night on Lake Avenue. And Lake Avenue is a street in Rochester, New York, which is my hometown. I was very familiar with Lake Ave, and Lake Ave was a place where they used to do a lot of drag racing. At one point, I was able to interview Lou in his studio in Rochester, and he's got a couple of muscle cars in the front there, and we talked a little bit about the origins of Rev on the Red Line, and indeed, he used to drag race. So it's kind of a sentimental favorite for that reason because of that particular song, and it's a good album. I don't think it really cracked the public consciousness like some of the other ones, but they were still this. I believe this is still the six-piece classic lineup that's on this one. Is it? I mean, it's because it's only their. Is it? This was their third album, right? I'm kind of going from memory.
Yeah, third album.
Yeah, right. So it wasn't until four that they, have the split down to the four members. So it still is. It's very classic Foreigner. I think that after the first two albums, again, it didn't necessarily stray too far from that formula that had worked for them on the self-titled debut and on Double Vision. Very enjoyable album, and I guess that's about it.
All right, well, this is probably where we do a lot of deviation here. My number five is actually going to be, oddly enough, and I didn't even realize this until I started doing this. This album that is number five for me is actually Foreigner's biggest selling album. So that would be what album?
Four,
Nope.
really? So it's got to
Yeah,
be Double
see,
Vision.
that's what I thought too. Yeah, Double
Yeah,
Vision,
gotta be Double
seven
Vision.
times
Yeah.
platinum. Who would I don't know. Seven times platinum. I was shocked when I saw that. I thought I had to do a double take on that. Obviously it's a great album. Don't get me wrong, but I didn't even know it was that sold that much myself. So it came in. It reached the top three. Number three, which is great for the albums there. And you know, very good album. Highlights for me would be Hot Blooded, Blue Morning, Blue Day. That's probably one of my all-time favorite Lou Gramm vocals on a Foreigner song. They're just great. And there's it kind of loses me on the second side. I think that's kind of why I drove it down a little bit. I just not too big of a fan on those last few songs on the album, and they got the instrumental on there, which I'm not really a fan of either. But Love is taking its toll, Back Where You Belong. Some good stuff. Really, some good stuff. Definitely a good album, a very, very good album. But for me, it's only going to be number five.
All right. So what are we up to?
You're going with number four now for you.
Number four. All right. Are we really up to number four? Head
Yeah.
games. Wait a minute. I'm trying to think. So this is fourth.
Yep.
Well, if I was going to do the fourth, I guess it would make sense to put four, but I'm not gonna. We're gonna go with us. We're gonna go with your much maligned, my much beloved, Mr. Moonlight. Okay.
Ooh, wow.
Yeah. I mean, I tell you, this album may not have garnered a lot of attention, but I'll tell you what I like about
Hmm.
it. It was the album, the only album with Lou Gramm that the band did not have the pressure to be Foreigner. Lou came back to the band after Unusual Heat, and I think he put out the kind of album he wanted to put out. This reminds me more of an updated version of the classic Foreigner sound from the beginning part of their catalog, as opposed to the latter keyboard driven part. I think there's a lot of rockers on this album. I agree with your assessment. I think that it gets a little bit weaker as it goes on, but this is a great listen. I think it's kind of lost classic. Maybe it's tough for some people because it didn't get radio play. When you think about some of the songs on Foreigner's other albums, I mean, you hear them; they're ubiquitous, for lack of a better term. And there's nothing on this particular record that is received airplay of the magnitude of, Head Games or Double Vision or I Want to Know What Love Is or whatever.
Hmm.
But man, it just rocks. It just feels like a band that is trying to make a statement. And I would have loved it if they were able to pull off one more album after this, but I believe that Lou, I think it was shortly after this that Lou was diagnosed with a brain tumor. So we were never able to kind of get the follow up to this. But I don't know, man. Sometimes I feel like a band like, a Foreigner, especially when they're released from the reins of having to live up to their past work, that they really just come up with some stuff that's very interesting. That's not always the case. I think like REO Speedwagon, for example, some of their post,
Hmm.
heyday stuff is pretty mediocre. I think Styx struggled for a while, even though their last two albums were really good, but there was some kind of, we couldn't quite come up with material that was up to the quality. But I think Foreigners is one of these bands that, man, this is just a really good kind of late career effort for a band that had a hell of a run, man. I mean, Foreigners' run was incredible.
Yeah, no doubt. All right. Well, it seems like we kind of tapped off here. You gave me Mr. Moonlight, and then I got my number four as the one that you gave the business to down there with the low blows, Agent Provocateur, number
Woo.
four. Now, for that one, for me, that album actually reached number four on the charts, so it was no slouch. I know, yeah, some of it was driven because of I Want to Know What Love Is, but it's still three times platinum. I mean, you can't, it's not a fluke, let's put it that way. But obviously, that is where there's album sales dipped. There's no, you
Mhm.
can't deny that fact. But now you pretty much only summed up. Um, you kind of forgot to mention some of the gems on the album. Tooth and Nail. I mean that is
Oof.
killer. I don't know if you saw that song in when they played it live during that tour. Unbelievable. I saw it twice.
Yeah.
Great song. Went over really good in concert. I don't know if you've seen them on that tour.
No, I think, but I mean, in all fairness, in all seriousness, I think this is kind of a function of our ages. So I'm 55. You at least, how much younger are you than me?
Maybe
At
a
least
year.
really? See, I thought you were a little bit younger than I was. And I think, this album kind of came out at a time that might have captured your attention more than it would have mine. Again, I just don't, I just felt that it just sounded just too 80s, man. Too like, I don't know.
Yeah.
But I was a rocker, man. I grew up in the arena rocker. I'm going into an arena. It's filled
Yeah.
with smoke and everybody's, smoking weed and all that stuff. And I don't know, this felt like
Mhm.
a kind of a letdown for me. And that's the great thing about these ranking things is that there's no right answer. I mean, a lot of it is personal preference, and they're kind of meant to drive a conversation, not an argument. So you're not any more right about it than I am. I mean, there's lots of people that love this album because they bought it.
Oh yeah, 3 million people can contest
Yeah,
that. All
sure.
right, and and I feel that probably in my opinion, their finest ballad that was yesterday. I just love that song. It's so takes you back to a point in time. That song is just phenomenal. It's one of those songs that, like you said, how the band nowadays kind of kicks off the set list. You
Yeah,
very rarely see it on there, but when you do, what a treat it is. And Kelly Hansen sings it just as fine as Lou does as well when they throw it in their concerts. Reaction to Action was another harder edge song on the album. Stranger in My Own House. I mean, there's definitely was some good stuff on here. Down on Love, another kind of ballad, but not as soft as I Want to Know What Love Is. So, but yeah,
yeah,
definitely this album. A few, there's a few clunkers in here. A little bit of filler, but nothing as bad as from what though if I would if I would have gone off your recommendation on this album, I never would have bought it. But since I know the album, to
yeah,
me, it's two different things. One thing for you, one thing for me, and
yeah.
we're gonna move on to number three for you. What's your third?
My third is four, and honestly, if they had no other song on this record other than Jukebox Hero, it would still be at least number three because I think that that may be one of the greatest rock songs ever written. And if you were a young man who used to go to rock concerts, and you could relate to that song. And it's interesting because when I interviewed Lou and everything, and we talked about this, and he was talking about standing outside the backstage door, and it was the Rochester War Memorial where I saw all my concerts growing up. And he was
Yep.
talking about being outside a Jimi Hendrix show in Rochester and listening in the rain or whatever. But it just, it taps into the emotions of every young man and possibly woman who just wanted to be a rock star and, go to the sold out concert, and the excitement that was arena rock. And man, it's just beautiful. It's great. And the album, it was definitely it was a bit of a shift from what they had done previously. They went down to 4 members after having 6, probably some internal strife or whatever. I don't know what the politics were in the band, but um, urgent. I mean, a lot of hits. Waiting for a Girl Like You. I mean, it's a classic. It's a classic album. I mean, you can make the case as this being their best album, certainly too. But we got a couple more to go. So
Yep. Yeah.
I'm at least putting it in 3. But I think the top 3 foreigner albums. I think we'll probably. It sounds like we're going to be close. I mean, there's one obviously we've deviated on, which is Double Vision. But man, I mean, these guys. They put out some great music. It's almost mind boggling when you go back through and you run through some of these records and look at how many great songs there are.
Like you said, I mean, when you get down to the final 5, this band was definitely one of them that was very tough. I mean, I'd
Yeah,
say maybe my top 2 were solid choices, but 3, 4, and 5, you could switch them out depending on how you feel that day.
right.
All right, so let's see. We're on number 3. So for me, you had already mentioned this album, so we're going back to 1979 for some head games. Um, this album made number 5 on the Billboard charts, which is phenomenal. I remember in school when this album came out, how so many people were into this album. And it ended up going 5 times platinum. So it's been certified that many times since that date back in '79. This album, like you said, there was out of the songs they still play today, basically the only ones you hear usually are Dirty White Boy and Head Games.
Yep.
But Red on the Red Line definitely, you know, great song. I'll Get Even with You. Do What You Like. That's another kind of a rare song you don't hear much of, but that is definitely one of the gems of the album. I would call it, and the modern day. Some really good stuff on here. It's a little different. It doesn't really come across their usual formula. Blinded by Science. I mean, that's a kind of a unique foreigner song. You know.
Yeah, there's definitely a different production quality on this than any of their first 4 albums. It kind of stands out. I think Foreigner and Double Vision have a very similar sound and feel to them. And of course, 4 kind of moved into the more commercial direction, but this one definitely seems a little raw, in terms of the mix and the warmth of the mix as well.
Yeah, definitely. Are you familiar with the production team on this album?
No clue. I know that there was a girl wiping her phone number off the bathroom wall. I think there was actually some controversy surrounding the album cover at the time, if I remember correctly, but I don't remember the full story. But no, I don't know.
All right. Well, it was
Who's
Roy Thomas Baker was the main producer, and Mick and Ian were on board as
Look
well.
at
I
that?
guess.
Yeah,
Yeah, Mick
Roy
and
Thomas
Ian.
Baker.
Yep, from Queen fame.
Yeah, yeah. They work with Cheap Trick as well. So yeah, no, he's the guy. Yeah, I wouldn't have picked him. It definitely doesn't. It's not very characteristic of his production work.
Yeah. So obviously, like you said, this was the last album before. I think, yeah, the last album before they went down in membership.
Yeah, yeah.
So, uh, good album for me. It made number 3, and now we're gonna hit our top 2. Let's see
Top 2, man. You got you
what do
got
you
the word
got.
double. Got the word double in it. It's got to be 2. Let me close my eyes. Wow, I'm seeing twice. I got double vision. I got double vision. Yeah, like I said, I mean, this album, I'm not all that surprised that it was their top selling album. I think I did think it was four, like you. I think most people perceive that, but this is it, man. This is the album that takes Foreigner from a one hit wonder band, a la like you look at a band like the Black Crowes. They have come out with that huge debut, and then or if you name is Crows, I think Counting Crows is the same thing. So there's bands that have like that first album. It's like, oh wow, this is great, and then the second album is the one that either makes you or breaks you. And we know what happened with Foreigner. This made him. I mean, this was the album that turned them from a an album or a group with a great debut album to a group with that was beginning to start a career. I mean, like I believe
Hmm.
that if I had to guess, and well, maybe this is something for somebody else to do since we're not going to do it in the middle of the show, but I think if you counted up the songs and Foreigner plays live now, that probably the bulk of them are from the first two albums.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely have to agree with you on that one.
Yeah.
All right, is that all you have to say about this album?
We didn't talk about the double vision is from Lou Graham was watching a hockey game and somebody got hurt and said they had double vision. So I don't know if you knew that.
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
All right.
Probably the only thing that Western New York hockey inspired that was any
Oh,
good.
jeez.
Ooh. sorry, sorry, that was a little rough, but true. If you know anything about Sabres,
Ugh.
yeah, it's been a
It's
rough
gonna
run.
it's gonna be a long season this year.
Yeah, yeah. You'll want to have double vision because that's the only way you could. Even if you double the number of wins, they still are going to be pretty awful. So maybe Foreigner should lend this song to the Sabres so they can have some excitement. But oh well, I digress. So and this record, I'll tell you another reason it didn't shock me all that much that it was their biggest selling because as a vinyl record collector, I go to a lot of used record stores and you always see a copy of this. And there was I think two or three different versions of the cover.
Hmm.
So like the Police did that with Synchronicity, and some other bands, did that too, where they kind of I think the Police had like eight or nine different versions, but I'm pretty sure Foreigner had at least two, if not more, different versions of the front cover of Double Vision, which is kind of cool.
Hmm. Interesting.
Yeah.
All right, so number two for me is Four. Foreigner 4, released in 1981. Their only album to top the charts. Went 6 times platinum, so close to Double Vision. Second best-selling Foreigner album of all time. It's also the only Foreigner album that has 4 top 40 singles on it.
Hmm.
So, a great album overall. Mutt Lange produced it. You know, that's one of his feathers in his cap there. You know, they did a couple shows with this album actually over the last, I think it was like about 5 years ago, where they played like the album in its entirety with Kelly
Mm-hmm.
singing, which they put out a live album of it. Man, it sounds really good. It's so good to hear Nightlife and Break It Up live because those are two songs that the band never plays live anymore, and those were definitely gems from this album for sure. Break It Up, uh, Hard Edge song, those Jukebox Heroes sandwiched right in the middle of Nightlife and Break It Up. That I mean, it's not that. What a way to start an album. You got those three songs, so of course it was gonna just take off. Then they follow up with a ballad, "Waiting for a Girl Like You." Luann, another song that the band used to play live here and there. I remember they came to Silver Stadium in '85 with Aerosmith, Joe Walsh, and the Hooters, and they played Luann for the hometown fans of Rochester there. And Urgent, what can be said about that song? You hear it all over the place. People sample that song. Other artists, you hear like the beginning of it sampled in rap songs. All kinds of stuff going on here with this album. But number two, I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know what you have to say about, what else you might have to say about this album.
I think they said, Double Vision solidifies the band.
Hmm.
Head Games was a good fall, but it didn't really take them to the next level. This is the album that takes them to the next level. I mean, if they never recorded another album after this one, they're good. I mean, it's I mean, this is where they really gained their reputation. I think four was kind of the bridge between the more heavily commercialized stuff and the rock stuff, rock oriented stuff. So it's an important piece of their history. Um, I guess I didn't, I forgot that Mutt Lang did this one. I mean, can Mutt Lang produce a bad album? I mean, the guy's a genius. I mean, but I think Mutt knows a good song when he hears it, but Mutt also can take a good song and make it a great song. So they had strong material going in, and the result was it was good, and it's a balanced effort. The ballads aren't too sappy, and the rockers aren't too soft. I mean, it's there's not a lot of critiques you can make for this one.
Well, that leads us to our number one, which, if anybody's paying attention, they'll know that we actually agree on. So,
Well, yeah, wow, that's crazy. Yeah,
yeah.
I was originally going to switch it to Mr. Moonlight just to mess with you, but no, I'm not going to do that. Uh, yeah, we're going to agree on this one. It's interesting because if you think about it, you might think, oh, wow, your first album is your best album, then you never lived up to that. I don't think that's the case. I think Foreigner, certainly their music increased in quality, it increased in commercial viability. It's just there is something really special about this particular record. A first record by a band, there's a magic and an emotion that you simply can never recapture. Look at that. I mean, think of some of the great first albums by bands. I mean, the one that pops into my head almost immediately is like Boston,
Oh, yeah.
Van Halen. I mean, I could stop right there. I think Foreigner's first album kind of falls into conversation with records like that. I mean, the first Boston album there's not a bad millisecond on it. Same with the first Van Halen album. That's not to say Boston and Van Halen never put out another great album. Of course they did. But man, it was magical. Foreigner, did they ever put out another great album? Of course they did. But man, this record, I don't know, man, it never gets old. It doesn't sound dated. It's got these are guys getting to know each other in the studio. You've got these, the guys that have been around for a while. You got the young guy from Rochester who finally got his break. They're still getting along. They're not necessarily jaded by the industry yet. It's and the songs. I mean, feels like the first time. It's a classic. Cold as ice. Are you kidding me? I mean, wow. I don't know. I mean, I could gush about this album forever. I love it. I love listening to it. Um, it's great. It's great. I said this falls right in there with some of the great first albums by classic rock bands. Great first albums of all time.
Yeah, and an interesting fact on this album, it's actually has two songs which Lou Gramm doesn't even really take the lead vocals on, actually, believe it or not. The Mick Jones is what I feel is, obviously his greatest Foreigner vocal, Star Rider.
Yeah.
Phenomenal they perform that song with Mick Jones singing. Just phenomenal. Seen it a few times, and every time I hear it, I just, it just takes you back to that moment, and you think about how great that song sounds live. And then the Fool for Your Anyway, that's the one that he also, or no, I'm sorry, Woman Oh Woman is the other one that he sang. Yeah, Woman Oh Woman.
Yeah.
So I mean, but other than that, and like you said, feels like the first time. That's a song the band pretty much opened a lot of their earlier career. All their shows pretty much up until like the mid '80s, they usually opened with that one. So I mean, that just goes to show you the staying power of these songs. Cold as Ice, Head Knocker, another great song there. Long Way from Home, which they play a lot even to this day. They still throw it in there. Just some really good stuff on this album, and they definitely hit a home run with the first album.
Yeah. I mean, who would have thunk? I mean, they were. I think Mick was just out of Spooky Tooth. Lou Gramm was like mopping floors in Rochester City Hall. You know, Ian McDonald. I mean, he's just King Crimson had dissolved. I mean, it's, you know, these guys are just they're just trying to throw crap at a wall and hope something stuck. And man, I'll tell you, they got something. And it's so interesting to me that you know, you get this amalgam of American and British sounds,
Hmm.
which doesn't always work. You know, but you know, over the years, it's not all that uncommon. Like, you know, with I think you and I talked once about the current Yes lineup is really more Americans than it is Brits, which is weird because it's like British progressive rock. But you know, those there's definitely some distinctions between the way Americans approach rock music and the way the English do, and to have them, you know, kind of come together, it was magical, you know. And so you hear more of that Buddy Holly kind of riff based stuff on this first album than you do on some of the later stuff. But Mick Jones is a brilliant songwriter. You'd say what you want about the guy. He's a brilliant songwriter. Lou Gramm is also a brilliant songwriter in his own right. You put these two together and it's magic. You know, that's the one thing that Foreigner can never replace. You can replace Lou's vocals, you can replace Nick's guitar for that matter. But ultimately, the magic came from the combination of the two of them and their work.
Yeah, and you know, it was a cool thing. I'm not sure if you're familiar with they when they got back together after the Unusual Heat album. They just played a few songs because they had a greatest hits album coming out.
Yep.
Interesting enough, the song "With Heaven on Our Side" actually, Johnny Edwards has a co-write on it, the singer from Unusual Heat. So, but that song, you know, it came out at the time when the music was changing. It only made 100 number 103 on the charts, but that song, if you ever listen to that song, that's one of Lou Gramm's greatest recorded vocals ever, you know, and it's a shame it just hides on like a greatest hits album. It never really gets its just due because, you know, a lot of people by that point already had some of the other Foreigners' greatest hits albums that were out. Only the real fans went out and got the one with the few new tracks on it, you know.
Yeah.
So that's
Well, you
what,
know,
yeah,
Lou Gramm deserves to be in the conversation with the greatest vocalists ever. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, he people say that about him. I mean, you know, he's up there with like a Robert Plant or a Paul Rogers, in my opinion. I mean, the guy's great. You know, the fact that I mean, Kelly Hansen on some levels got to feel intimidated by that, but I think he does an excellent job. But man, there's only one Lou Gramm. That's the reality.
yep, that's true. And there's only one Foreigner.
Well, there's two foreigners. I mean, you know, not to be, you know, flip, but I mean, the current touring band does not have any of the members that performed on the first album. I mean, Mick doesn't make all the shows for whatever reason. I don't begrudge them. I think that the current foreigner lineup is awesome. I've never seen foreigner put on a bad show. Current lineup or previous lineup, it's always a quality show. But this current band is different than the band that recorded that first album. So it kind of goes back to the importance and majesty of it. You know, you can recreate it with the new lineup. It's still not quite the same. You know,
But it's close.
it is. Yeah. No. I mean, you know, you get the right musicians, you can perform anything, and
Yeah,
they've got a great combination. But that's also a testament to Mick Jones, because Mick Jones is not going to bring in a bunch of hacks. He's not going to do it. He cares too much about his material. So that's why Foreigner is the current lineup is such a great band, because he cares about it, you know?
exactly. All right, well, that pretty much puts a wrap on this edition of the rankings, Foreigner studio albums. You know, we've done, it's our fourth one now, so we'll have to dig into our, dig deep for our next one. So if you guys have any suggestions, leave them in the comments after you watch this one,
Yeah.
and you know, give us your take on these your rankings. What would your rankings be? You know, we always love to hear, you know, why you might like a particular album, or you know, did you agree with Tom, you know, and his Mr. Moonlight assessment there, or did you not? You know, let them know. Let us know. You know,
Yeah.
we're open to criticism. You know, this is just our way of letting you know about these albums and what we feel and how we feel about them. So the more people that chime in, the better.
Yeah. So next, I'm thinking Barry Manilow. What do you think?
Yeah, well, we still got to do a couple other things. We're gonna start doing songs.
Yeah.
We're gonna rank songs from an artist too. So we're gonna
Yeah.
probably get into that probably in a little while. So yep, just keep your suggestions coming, and we'll see you on the next edition.